हेलो एंड वेलकम एवरीवन टू द डेली न्यूज एनालिसिस ऑफ 12th ऑफ अक्टूबर 2023। आज की इम्पोर्टेंट आज के इम्पोर्टेंट आर्टिकल जो भी जितने भी हैं हिंदू न्यूज़पेपर से, चलिए वन बाय वन देख लेते हैं। पहला जो है, ऑपरेशन अजय सेट टू इवैक्यूएट इंडियन नेशनल फ्रॉम इजराइल, चाइनीज क्रू नॉट अलाउड टू कम ashore एट बिजिन बिजिनजान Bijinjam put. Then UN Security Council reform is a song in loop. Then spring cleaning, women's quota, rhetoric and reality, concerns about government's fact check unit. Then the event before and after Operation Polo in Hyderabad post independence, India and China agree to continue dialogue and negotiations at Colombo meet. Jaishankar flags a danger of unviable debt. Then Supreme Court divided on women's right to end 26-week pregnancy. And most European Union nations want to continue to funding the Palestinian Authority. ये हमारा लास्ट का आर्टिकल है। चलिए देखते हैं वन बाय वन। पहला जो है, ऑपरेशन अजय सेट टू इवैक्यूएट इंडियन नेशनल फ्रॉम इजराइल। इजराइल में जो वार चल रहा है वहां से इंडियन नेशनल को इवैक्यूएट करने के लिए जो ऑपरेशन हो रहा है उसे अजय का नाम दिया गया है। India is putting in a place a major operation to evacuate its citizens who wish to return from conflict-hit Israel, announcing the initiative late on Wednesday. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar said special charter flights are being arranged. This will be the second evacuation this year after Operation Kaveri that brought back several thousands Indian citizens from term conflict-torn Sudan in April and May. Launching Operation Ajay to facilitate the return from Israel of our citizens who wish to return, special charter flights and other arrangements being put in place, fully committed to the safety and well-being of our nationals abroad. Our nationals abroad, said Mr. S. Jaishankar on X. The Indian embassy in the Tel Aviv stated that it has emailed the first lot of registered Indian citizens for the special flight that is expected to take off for India on Thursday. Messages to other registered people will follow for subsequent flights, said the embassy in a post on X. The announcement has come days after Air India suspended its service in the Delhi Tel Aviv route as Hamas carried out a crippling attack on Israel last Saturday. Following that ground, sky and sea attack, Israel has launched a massive military strike against Gaza Strip. The rapid escalation has also drawn the Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, which has lobbed rocket at Israel's northern territory, drawing Israel strikes. The situation has turned in the sky above Israel risky, prompting cancellation of many international flights. A source indicated that the scale of Operation Ajay will depend on demand and that the government will augment capacities depending on further need. Control room setup. India has been preparing for the escalating situation soon after the conflict erupted on Saturday. On Wednesday, the Ministry of External Affairs set up a 24-hour control room which will operate simultaneously from New Delhi, Tel Aviv, and Ramallah is the Palestinian territory. There are at least 900 Indian students who are enrolled in various Israeli universities and institutions that apart a large number of traders, IT professionals, and domestic workers and caregivers work in Israel. A significant foot of Israel population consists of Indian origin Jews who trace their background to Kochi, Kolkata, and Mumbai after the outbreak of the hostilities. Meghalaya Chief Minister Conrad Sangma had brought to notice that pilgrims were stuck in the Bethlehem in Palestinian territories and sought assistance from the External Affairs Minister to evacuate them. The next is Chinese crew not allowed to come ashore at Bijinjam port. Though the Chinese ship carry container handling cranes is allowed to dock at the under construction Bijingjam International Seaport developed by Adani Bijingjam Port Private Limited in Kerala, the Chinese crew on board the ship are not allowed to come ashore. According to sources, the ship that has been waiting at the outer anchorage of Bijingjam since Wednesday night will be allowed to berth only on October 14, a day ahead of the reception to be accorded by the state administration to the ship and its consignment. Since the engineers from China are not granted visas, a delegation of service engineers brought by the Chinese company from Mumbai would coordinate the installation and testing work on the cranes at the berth here, sources said. Upon completion, the Bijingjam International Seaport is expected to carry cater 75% of India's container transshipment needs, with the port having an installed capacity to handle container vessels of up to 24,000 TEU. The first phase of the over 7,500 crore rupees port project is scheduled to be commissioned in May 2024. The next, a UN Security Council reform is a song in a loop. More than 3 decades after the debate first started over fundamental reforms at the United Nations, the issue appears to have resurfaced at the ongoing General Assembly sessions of the world body. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey was blunt. The Security Council has ceased to be a guarantor of world security and has become a battleground for the political strategy of the only 5 countries. Even the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres issued a stern warning. The world has changed, our institutions have not. We cannot effectively address problems as they are if institutions do not reflect the world as it is. Instead of solving problems, they risk becoming part of the problem. It could not have been put more bluntly, but we have heard this song before. Politically, it is untenable that the 5 permanent members China, France, Russia, and United Kingdom and United States enjoy their position and the privilege of a veto over any council resolution or decision merely by virtue of having won a war 76 years ago. In the case of China, the word own needs to be played within inverted commas. I was serving at the United Nations when then Secretary General Boutros Ghali declared that Security Council reform must be accomplished in time for the 50th anniversary of the World Organization 1995. But even as the urgent rate they continue to be spoken, the organization has made not only the 50th anniversary of United Nations but even the 60th, 70th, and now the 75th. Left to their own device, member states will, by arguing the merits of the case well past the United Nations centenary, was expanded from 11 members to 15 members by adding 4 more elected non-permanent members. So, and many more countries, both in absolute number and as a proportion of the membership, do not feel adequately represented on the body. The composition of the council also gives undue weightage to the balance of power of those days. Europe, for instance, which amounts for barely 5% of the world's population, still controls 33% of the seats in any given year. And that does not count Russia, another European power. In terms of simple consideration of equity, this situation is unjust for starters to those countries whose financial contribution to the United Nations outweigh those of 4 of the 5 permanent members. Japan and Germany have for decades been the second and third largest contributors to The United Nations budget while still being referred to as enemy states in the United Nations Charter since the United Nations was set up by the victorious allies of the Second World War and it denies opportunity to other states such as India which by its sheer size of population share of the world economy and or contribution in kind to the United Nations through participation in peacekeeping operations, for example, have helped shape the evolution of world affairs in the 7 decades since the organization was born, stands by the countries. So the Security Council is clearly rigged for reform to bring it into the second quarter of the 21st century, but for every state that feels it deserves a place on the Security Council and especially the handful of countries which believe their status in the world ought to be recognized as being in no way inferior to at least the three of the existing permanent members, there are several who know that they will not be benefit from any reform. The small countries that make up more than half of the United Nations membership accept that reality and are content to compete occasionally for 2 years non-permanent seat on council, but the medium-sized and large economy which are the rivals of prospective beneficiaries deeply resent the prospect of a select few backing of their current second-rank status in the world body. Many are openly animated by a spirit of competition, historical grievance or simple envy. They have successfully and indefinitely thwarted reform of the membership of the Security Council. Part of the problem is that the bar to amending the United Nations Charter has been set rather high. Any amendment requires a two-thirds majority of the overall membership. In other words, 129 of the 193 states in the General Assembly would further have to be ratified by two-thirds of the member states. Ratification is usually a parliamentary procedure. So, in other words, the only prescription that has any chance of passing is one that will both persuade two-thirds of the United Member States to support it and not attract the opposition of any of the existing permanent five, and even that of a powerful US senator who could block ratification in Washington. That has proved to be a tall order indeed. India's credential may seem obvious to us, but China is known to keen on diluting its status as the only Asian permanent member. Pakistan, which fancies itself as India's strategical rival on the subcontinent, is unalterably opposed, and to some extent Indonesia seems to feel diminished by the prospect of an Indian seat in Latin America. Brazil occupies a place analogous to India in Asia, but Argentina, Mexico have other ideas pointing to Portuguese speaking Hispanic Latin America and while Africa, given that it accounts for 54 member states, insists on two permanent seats, how is one to adjudicate the rival credential of the continent's largest democracy, Nigeria, its historically largest economy, South Africa, and its oldest civilization, Egypt? Another proposal suggests creating a second category of semi-permanent members to accommodate such states for say 10-year electable terms. It has found no takers among the principal aspirants, continuing gridlock. So while the keeps going round in circles for decades, gridlock continues in the Security Council as most vividly illustrated recently over the Ukraine conflict when a permanent member of the Security Council invaded a sovereign United Nations member state and the Council proved powerless to respond. Russia's increasing resort to the veto has blocked the resolution on Ukraine, Mali, Syria, and North Korea. Similar obstructionism by the West has affected proposal to reform the financial institution established at Bretton Woods in 1944, the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. And yet this is the only global system we have got that bring all countries together on a common platform. Can we afford to let it fade into ineffectiveness and irrelevance? And next is spring spring cleaning. The Good and Service Tax Council had last Saturday lifted the hedge on about a dozen tax treatment ambiguities, some of which have been lingered since the indirect tax regimes launched in July 2017, such as the tax on corporate and personal guarantees for bank loan city, slashed the GST on molasses from 28% to 5% with a view to lower cattle feed cost and ease of cash flow for sugar mills so they may pay farmers dues faster. Rate tweaks and spring cleaning clarifications but one of the significant outcomes was the decision not to exercise the council power to tax extra neutral alcohol used for alcoholic liquor with alcohol for human consumption still outside the GST net. The indirect tax levy on ENA or high strength potable alcohol, a key ingredient, could not be set off against state levies on the final product. Industry has been seeking for clarity on this vexed issue for years, with courts taking varying positions. It is heartening that the council that met just twice in 2022 has met four times this year and thrice in the just 4 months, even if a few agenda items pertain to fixing anomalies in recent decisions with the age north for the president and members of the long-awaited GST appellate tribunals now harmonized with other tribunals a clearly avoidable oversight. One hopes they will become operational soon for consumers and producers. However, the biggest matter of concern should be the Council's resolve to meet at a future date exclusively to discuss what Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman termed prospective planning on the GST compensation says and what kind of surcharge it could be replaced with. Originally packaged as a time-bound levy on top of a good and simple tax to compensate states for revenue losses for the past 5 years of the GST, the COVID-19 pandemic's hit on tax collection has triggered an extension of the cess levied on so-called demerit goods such as aerated drinks, tobacco production, and automobiles till March 2026. Discouraging some seen goods may be desirable, however, ringing in a new cess must not be done in isolation, but as a part of the broader rationalization of GST's complex multiple rate structure. This rationalization exercise, initiated 2 years ago, unfortunately remains off the table despite robust revenue inflows in recent times. Frequent tweaks of irritant aside, the GST regime needs a holistic reform plan including a roadmap to bring in excluded items such as electricity, petroleum, and alcohol. Then, women's quota rhetoric and reality. The celebration of the passing of the Women's Reservation Bill by both houses of Parliament glosses over certain realities about this conditional legislation. The conduct of a census in the country followed by a delimitation of constituency based on this census are the condition for this legislation to take effect. Once it is accepted that reservation for women in legislative bodies is a progressive measure, there is no legal or political justification to prolong its implementation. Speaking in the Lok Sabha, Home Minister Amit Shah justified these conditions, saying that there could be legal challenges against the legislation if it is passed without relying on criteria fixed by way of a process of delimitation. No doubt a legislation should be based on a solid foundation and have valid reasons for existence. In the case of women's reservation law, the reality is that about half of the population are women and they are underrepresented in the parliament and state legislative bodies. Reports shows that of the maximum allowed 550 seats in the Lok Sabha, only 82, that is 15%, are represented by women, and out of 250 members in the Rajya Sabha, only 31, that is 12%, are women. The global gender gap report places this in a microscopic microscopic context by showing that India ranks at 141 out of 185 in its list. Contentious, contentious issue. Article 81 clause 2 subclause A of the Constitution states that the number of seats in Lok Sabha for a state should have a correlation with the population of the state and so far as practicable, the criteria should be same for all states. Article 170 concerning the legislative assemblies of states also takes population as the basis for designing constituencies. However, delimitation in India is a contentious issue. It acts as an incentive for population expansion which can't regard to development and family planning. This was why a full-fledged delimitation was kept in absence in India since 1976. It is now expected to be carried out after the census, which will only be held by 2026 at the earliest. But as scholars Nilakant RS predict this demographic detonations will cause another big shock in the future allocation of political power and associated resources between the North and South. In his book South versus North 2022, Mr. Nilakantan has demonstrated how South India has performed well in sectors such as health, education, economy, etc. in comparison to North. South Indian states reduced their population by scientific means, whereas North Indian states in general and states such as Uttar Pradesh and Bihar in particular have failed to do so. The South Indian states have raised concerns about this proposed delimitation. This could lead to two outcomes. The delimitation would get prolonged by years, which in turn will defer the materialization of the women's quota law, or might happen based on the population, which in turn could translate to undue advantages for certain states in the north. These are situations that the relevant provisions in the Constitution, namely Article 81 and 170, failed to foresee. Thus, Parliament has committed an egregious only in fusing women's reservation with delimitation. Article 330 and 332 of the Constitution deal with the reservation of the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe in the Lok Sabha and the Legislative Assembly of the states respectively. Though these articles mention the relationship between reservation and the population of the Supreme Court and SC and ST groups such as a parameter in the irrelevant women quota that their share is in the total population almost 50% is undisputed. Further, there cannot be a drastic variation in their population from one constituency to other, as it could happen with SC and SC or ST on one warranted condition. A census to understand the population of women for the purpose of reservation is also unwarranted. The criteria, process, and purposes of women's reservation bill are qualitatively different from those of the delimitation exercise and reservation for women in local bodies, which materialized through the 73rd and 74th Amendment Act of the Constitution and came into effect in 1993, was not cognizant on any delimitation exercise for that purpose. Tribe Parliament, however, has lost sight of this aspect. How far a constitutional amendment can be done by way of cognizant legislation is an issue. Two, as certainly is regarded as one of the hallmarks of the modern constitution in Hamdard, the Dakhna versus Union of India, the Supreme Court hinted that in conditional registration for statute to take effect, there could be a further dependence on the executive or even on the legislature of the future day, among other things. Such enactment might be needed on various occasions for multiple reasons, but by amalgamating the demands for women's reservation with the uncertainty of a future delimitation process, that too in the case of a constitutional amendment, Parliament has made populist rhetoric at the best or committed a constitutional blunder at worst. The secrecy maintained on the subject till the commencement of the special session was also thoroughly undemocratic, which in turn prevented the exposure of the foils of the legislation. Therefore, with regard to future of the women's quota in the legislature, one can only have the pessimism of the intelligence and the optimism of the will, as, as Antonio Gramsci famously put it in a different context. Then concerns about government's fact check unit. The Bombay High Court on September 29 reserved its verdict in a batch of British petitions challenging the constitutionality of the Information Technology Intermediary Guidelines and Digital Media Ethics Code. Amendment Rules 2023 IT Rules. The rules permit a fast check fact check unit FCU of the Union government to identify fake or false or misleading online content related to the business of the central government and demand its removal. What happened in April this year? The Ministry of Electronics and IT promulgated the 2023 IT rules, which amended the Information Technology Rules 2021 and allowed the ministry to appoint a fact-checking unit. Subsequently, Kunal Kamra, a political satirist, the Editor Guild of India and the Association of Indian Magazine filed a writ petition before the Bombay High Court challenging Rules 3 Clause 1 Subclause BV of the IT rules that permit the constitution of a FCU the petitioner contend that the provision would enable government-led censorship online and empower the government to be the prosecutor the judge, and in that those loose sense, the the executioner of what constitution constitute the truth online. Defending the provision, the government has argued that the FCU will only notify intermediaries or online platform that the content they are hosting is fake, false, or misleading, and that intermediaries can choose to take it down or leave it with, of, with it. A disclaimer: a bench comprising Justice G. S. Patel and Leela Gokhale of the High Court said that it will pass its ruling on the controversial amendment on December 1. The government has apprised the court that the FCU will not be notified until the judgment is delivered. What does the amendment say? The amendment brings about significant changes to Rule 31BV of the IT Rules 2021, which deals with the responsibilities of intermediaries. They are now under an obligation to make reasonable efforts to ensure that users do not host, display, upload, modify, publish, transmit, store, update, and share any information which is identified as fake or false or misleading by a fact check unit for the central government. In respect of any business of the central government failure to comply with this puts intermediaries at risk of losing the safe harbor protection provided under Section 79 of the IT Act 2000. The safe harbor safeguard exempts intermediaries from liability for any third party information made available or hosted by them. What did the High Court say early on in the proceeding in April? The Bombay High Court observed that the amendments rules, no matter how well intentioned, lack necessary safeguards. The court expressed the opinion that prima facie the rules do not seem to offer protection for fair criticism of the government, like parody and satire, highlighting the ambiguity surrounding the term any business of the central government. And the court wondered if speeches made ahead of the 2024 Lok Sabha election would fall within its ambit. It then inquired if publications questioning the veracity of such political speeches would be covered by the amendment, thus empowering the government to identify fake or misleading news about itself. Additionally, in July, the court remarked that if the consequences of a law are unconstitutional, it has to be done away with no matter how laudable the motive for its introduction was. The remark was made after senior advocate Sarvai argued that the amendment violates Article 14 of the Constitution by discriminating between the false news about the government and the other false news. The court also questioned the sudden need for the FCU, pointing out that the Press Information Bureau has been efficiently fact-checking for years, also referring to underfined undefined terms in the rules such as fake, false, or misleading. The court outlined that what is misleading for one may not necessarily be misleading for another, underscoring that such terms are subjective and open to various interpretations. The court remarked those are the only three criteria to flag the content as false. We do not know business of the central government. The expression like fake is extremely problematic. One might argue something it is false. Falsity puts us in a binary fake does not even attempt to do that. The word misleading in the is an extremely problematic area since it is an opinion addressing editorial content online. Justice Patel inquired in newspapers if you look at criticism of government figures on the state of the economy figures may come from official sources. Analysts may have their own figures. Is it fake news? What happens to editorial content online? You may find any editorial extremely hard writing. Observing that the powers bestowed upon the FCU were sort of a diktat. The court expressed surprise that there is no provision in the rules that provides an opportunity for an aggrieved intermediary to justify or defend the flagged content. This violates the principle of natural justice. Similarly, the court said that it was troubled by the fact that even the user whose post has been removed or whose account has been suspended by the intermediary after being flagged by the FCO was left with no recourse of remedy. The next day, the event before and after Operation Polo in Hyderabad post independence. The partition of India and Pakistan is a dark chapter in the history of humanity that led to death, displacement, destruction of property of millions of people. A much more complex story, albeit on a smaller scale, of, unfolded in the princely kingdom of Hyderabad, ruled by Osman Ali Khan, who was as whimsical and unpredictable as they come. The kingdom had 81.17% Hindus and a 12.83% Muslim population. According to the 1941 census, when India became free on August 15, 1947, Hyderabad remained independent. Rather, it tried to stay independent, citing the communal Bornholming size of the kingdom and its infrastructure, but it was not be not to be. Beginning on September 13, 1948 at 4:30 am, the Indian Army attacked from four frontier and made short work of the kingdom's armed forces. The event leading up to what was called Operation Polo and its aftermath is still being researched, investigated, and written about. The newest book to join this corpus is Afshar Muhammad's remarking History 1948 Police Action and the Muslim of the Hyderabad, published by the Cambridge University Press in 2023. Afshar's book looks at the event of police action though through the prism of fiction and non-fiction, mostly in Telugu and Urdu languages, juxtaposed with oral histories collected over the past decade. Juxtaposed with oral histories collected over the past decade, Afsar tries to show how people dealt with the trauma and change in the social fabric, reliving reliving a trauma. Traumatic events are pushed out of memory. This is also true of Operation Polo, where the ruling class of Muslims and Hindu upper caste elite suddenly found themselves to be equal citizens. This sense of loss is captured in the title Hyderabad after the fall, edited by Umar Khalid. The book, published in 1988 in the US, has essay, eyewitness accounts, and also the first extract from the secret report commissioned by Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru into the post-merger violence in Hyderabad. The violence led to killing of around 30,000 to 40,000 people. According to this report, it makes for a grim read. Fall of Hyderabad by K.M. Munshi is a first-person account of the India's agent general in Hyderabad during the tumultuous period, being a key player in the drama where he was put under house arrest for a few days. Munshi's account is a key to understanding this period, but the version, rather the role Munshi claims to have played is at variance with other accounts, relying on documentary evidence and archival material. B.K. Bawa's last Nizam spans the lifetime of the last ruler of the Asaf Jahi dynasty. When it was first published in 1997, the book created a stir as it revealed the deep division and the inner working inside the palace of Nizam Usman Ali Khan. This autobiographical account of V.P. Menon, the right-hand man of Vallabhbhai Patel, shows the delicate minuet in Delhi as he carried out a nuanced diplomatic game in the story of the integration of Indian states. Menon devoted three chapters, three chapters to the issue but lays the groundwork for a generation of researchers. The last Prime Minister of Hyderabad, Like Ali, who was an industrialist, has written an account trying to justify the end game of the Nizam's reign in the tragedy of Hyderabad, likely is at the center of everything, trying to solve the transmission code of army, the deployment of troops, and planning the destruction of transport lines. Nurani's sharp account, published in 2014 to critical acclaim, A.G. Nurani's The Destruction of Hyderabad is a poignant but sharper account of the event before and after Operation Polo. Watershed with the legal document, personal letter, and the complete Sundarlal report. This one makes a grim reading about an event that had an element of certainty. It shows the key player, including Nizam Usman, Ali Khan, M.A. Jinnah, Sardar Patel, and Mountbatten, is in an unflattering light. Muhammad Haider was a bureaucrat in Usmanabad at the time of police action. Haider became a suspect, was tried and exonerated. His account of October Cop narrates the sequence of events as the war would, war wound down in 5 days. The, the memoir's title comes from the events in October 1947 when India and Hyderabad came close to signing a standstill agreement but were thwarted by the Majlis-e-Ittehadul Muslimin. The ringside's account is reverting, but some of the framing of larger event is fanciful. From autocracy to investigation by the Lucien D. Benichau through a vast amount of information between 1938 and 1948 to present a neutral account of events leading up to Operation Polo. The author does not sanitize the account and tells the impact on Muslims as it is. This makes for an uncomfortable but necessary read to understand the post-Operation Polo violence. Then next, India-China agree to continue dialogue and negotiation. India and China held the 20th round of Corps Commander level talks at the Chushul Muldu border meeting point on the Indian side over the past 2 days but failed to make any headway to end the standoff along the line of actual control in the eastern Ladakh. The two sides agreed to maintain the momentum of dialogue and negotiations while also committing to maintain peace and tranquility on the ground. The External Affairs Ministry said in a statement on Wednesday. The two sides exchanged views in a frank, open and constructive manner for an early and mutually acceptable resolution of the remaining issues along the LAC in the western sector in accordance with the guidance provided by the national leadership of the two countries and building on the progress made in the last round of Corps commanders meeting held on August 13, 14, 2023, the ministry said. The two sides also committed to maintain peace and tranquility on the ground in the border areas in the interim. It added at the 19th round of talks which came before the Shanghai Cooperation Organization virtual summit and ahead of the G20 summit hosted by the New Delhi. There was high expectation of a breakthrough on the stalemate at Despang Plains and Demchok in eastern Ladakh. Following the talks between the corps commander, several rounds of major general level talks were held as reported by the Hindu earlier. At Colombo met Jaishankar flags danger of unviable debt. India wants to be a friend to the world, the voice of the global south, and will work to ensure a free, open, and inclusive Indian Ocean region. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar said on Wednesday at the annual meeting of the 23-member Indian Ocean Regime Association in Colombo, where he also raised the danger of unsustainable debt. Mr. Jaishankar, who met Sri Lankan President Ranil Wickremesinghe, also witnessed the signing of three agreements on bilateral cooperation. The agreements include Indian assistance for housing projects, modernizing schools, and a new joint project between between the Indian National Dairy Development Board, Amul Cooperative, and the Sri Lankan Cargill Group to increase milk production in Sri Lanka. The minister's visit 3 months after Mr. Wickremesinghe's visit to Delhi also comes days ahead of the Sri Lankan president travel to Beijing for the Belt and Road Forum, where he expected to discuss the Sri Lankan debt crisis and Chinese infrastructural projects. We should be clear where the danger are, be it in hidden agendas, in unviable projects, or in on sustainable debt, exchange of experiences, sharing of best practices, greater awarenesses, and deeper collaboration are part of the solution. Mr. Jaishankar told a joint press appearance with his Sri Lankan Foreign Minister MUM Ali Sabri and his Bangladesh counterpart A.K. Abdul Momen. In comments, he appeared to direct at China's loan and project to countries in the region. Talks with IMF, the conference in the Colombo, comes even as Sri Lanka's government is continuing negotiations with the IMF for the $2.9 billion bailout to avoid the debt crisis with the second tranche of $330 million not yet released. Sri Lanka has own support from India, including through line of credit, debt payment moratorium, and currency swap arrangement worth almost $4 billion, and is hoping to finalize a debt restructuring package with China, one of its bigger creditors, after taking charges of the IORA forum on Wednesday. Mr. Sabri said Sri Lanka, which had last chaired the grouping in 2003-4, was a founding member of the Bandung Conference, which led to the non-aligned movement and also had introduced an United Nations resolution to declare the Indian Ocean region and airspace a zone of peace in 1971. Mr. Jaishankar said the spirit of 1971 that Mr. Savary had referred to was important, but that are the IORA group must discourage any hidden agenda to the contrary and must follow the United Nations Convention on the Law of Seas as the constitution of the seas. Proxy war. At a time of global polarization, we are taking the position of IORA that we want an ocean-free, open and inexclusive rules-based ocean for the benefit of all the countries of the region. We do not want anyone to play proxy war in the Indian Ocean specific area. Mr. Moomen told the Hindu here, adding that there was immense global interest in the IORA as the Indian Ocean, which sees 86% of the global trade, was the most important ocean. During the meeting, Sri Lanka took over as a chair and India as vice chair of IORA grouping, which was started in 1997 and now includes 23 countries from South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Australia, West Asia, and Africa. All of whom are situated around the Indian Ocean. In addition, about 11 major power are dialogue partners, including China, the US, and the UK, Russia, Japan, Turkey, and the most recent entrant Saudi Arabia. The next is Supreme Court divided on women's right to end 26-week pregnancy. A division bench of two women judges of the Supreme Court on Wednesday were split in their opinions about the decision of a married woman to abort her 26-week pregnancy and the centers resolve to save the unborn child unable to reach common grounds. Justice Hima Kohli and B.V. Nagarathamna finally referred the case to the Chief Justice of India to form a three-judge bench. The woman, a mother of two or her younger child, still a non-one-year-old infant, was firm in her affidavit that she wanted to medically terminate the pregnancy. She told the bench that she was taking medication for her mental condition and was not in a position to take care of a third child. The woman was present in court along with her husband, additional Solicitor General for the Union Government, Aishwarya Bharti, however, said the woman has no absolute rights of woman autonomy to exercise her reproductive rights in a way that would take away the rights of her unborn child. Mr. Bhatti referred to Medical Termination of Pregnancy Amendment Act of 2021, which extended the deadline for abortion in the exceptional circumstances to 24 weeks. She said these circumstances allowed medical termination only if it is necessary to save the life of fatal deformity detected in the fetus. Once there is a viable baby, the relief cannot be one-sided unless she wants to keep the child. Her right to bodily autonomy and or integrity cannot be beyond the act. Her fundamental right to choice can be curtailed by the parliament, Mr. Bharti argued. On October 9, the bench of Justice Kohli and Nagaratna had, after getting a report from an All India Institute of Medical Science medical board, allowed the medical termination of the woman pregnancy in accordance with her wish. However, the union returned to the Supreme Court with an application which said that one of the expert doctors on the medical board had emailed MS Bharti on October 10 against the abortion, saying the child would be given a chance to survive. A categorical medical opinion has come now that the child has a chance to survive. The state has a responsibility, Mr. Bhatti said. The woman's lawyer in turn submitted that the court should give paramount consideration to the mother. The first concern is that mother, the child interest is secondary. Her privacy and dignity is under threat, the counsel for the woman said. Lawyer said the woman had taken a conscious decision not have the baby. Justice Kohli, in her opinion, argued with the government that women should not be permitted to terminate the pregnancy. However, Justice Nagaratna disagreed with her colleagues on the bench, saying the woman's decision ought to be respected. This is not the case of a viable baby being born or unborn. This interest of the petitioner has to be considered. Her socio-economic situation first, that she is a mother of two and her second child is only a year old. She has reiterated that her mental condition and the medication for it does not permit her to continue with the pregnancy. Her decision must be respected by the court. The court must not substitute her decision with a decision of its own. Justice Nagaratna observed, disagreeing with Justice Kohli. She said the government's application to recall the October 19 order should be rejected and dismissed. तो आज का लास्ट आर्टिकल है, मोस्ट यूरोपियन यूनियन नेशन want to continue funding the Palestinian Authority. The overwhelming majority of European Union countries supported continuing aid payment to the Palestinian Authority, according to the bloc's top diplomat Joseph Borrell. The overwhelming majority was against the idea of the proposal of suspending the payment to the Palestinian Authority, Mr. Borrell said in a Muscat where he had been for the meeting with the Gulf Cooperation Council. Mr. Borrell said the payment about 600 million euros a year would be reviewed and not suspended. The European Union is the top international founder of the authority. The clarification came late on a Tuesday, a day after the European Union declared that it was meant aid to the Palestinian territories. The confusion had arisen after European Commissioner for Neighborhood and Enlargement Oliver Varela had stated publicly that payments would immediate stop following Hamas' bloody attack on Israel over the weekend. Over 1,200 people, including children and the elderly, were killed and over 150 were kidnapped by Hamas from Israeli sites. Large-scale bombing. In retaliation, Israel began bombing Gaza on a large scale and stopped food, water, medicine, and fuel from entering the strip of land home to 2.3 million Palestinian authorities reported that 1,055 have died since Saturday in the bombing. Mr. Borrell said Israel's response to the attack, like cutting water, cutting electricity, and food to a mass of civilians, was against international law. Israel had a right to defend itself against the Hamas attack, but its response had to be within the limits of the international law. He said. Several European Union countries, including France, Spain, Ireland, and Luxembourg, had on Monday privately or publicly opposed the move to suspend payment to the Palestinian territories, while some others, like Australia and Germany, had temporarily suspended their bilateral assistance. Foreign Minister of United European Union countries on Tuesday met informally via video link and in Muscat and discussed how they could continue engaging the Palestinian Authority. As per Mr. Borrell, and they drew a clear destination between Hamas, the Palestinian people, and the Palestinian Authority. We consider Hamas a terrorist organization, and what they have done shows certainly that they behave like this. Mr. Borrell said in a televised press briefing as he reiterated that the Palestinian Authority was a partner of the European Union. Mr. Borrell said collective punishment against all Palestinians will be unfair and productive and against our interest and against the interest of the peace. Collective punishment is prohibited under the international humanitarian law. Friends, this is all for today, and we will meet from tomorrow onwards with new news articles from the Hindu newspaper. So, thanks a lot to all my viewers.